And Beauty and the Beast was always my favorite, Disney story, fairy tale, whatever. There's a bookish heroine, there's a giant library, there's a wounded hero who is transformed by true love. It's just the best ever. And so I knew I needed to write that story.
Welcome to the LiteraryScape podcast, the only podcast that serves both readers and authors of historical Christian romance. We read, discuss, review, and rate books in this unique romance subgenre, and sprinkle in a few contemporary Christian suspense books. Authors, we bring you inside tips and tricks from those who have gone before you. Then we bring both readers and authors together for fun-filled live Q&As. LiteraryScape is the one-stop shop for both readers and authors to connect, learn, and grow together. Let's dive into this adventurous episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another Friday book discussion. And here on LiteraryScape, we are so excited to have Karen Witemeyer back with us. And this time, she is going to be talking about her fairy tales series. So welcome, Karen. So glad to have you.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so you have 3 books in is this your Texas Ever After series?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right. And so I know we've read all 3, and I know one of our dying questions after talking about it is for Cloaked in Beauty. Was it just based off of Little Red Riding Hood, or did you also pull in maybe some elements of Beauty and the Beast and Sleeping Beauty? And was there a third one we thought of? Anastasia. We thought there was some connection there. We're just curious.
So it was mostly based on Sleeping Beauty and Little Red Riding Hood. So when I was originally planning on doing it, the next idea was Sleeping Beauty, because I'm kind of going with like the Disney versions of the fairy tales. And so Sleeping Beauty was one of the classic 3. But when I started thinking about it, I was like, okay, we're not going to have fairies. We're not going to have, all this magical stuff. A mother send her child away to be raised in a forest. This doesn't make sense. As a mother, I was like, there is no way that I would send my child away like that. And so I had to come up with a legitimate reason to do that. And I thought to myself, who would I trust with my child? And the most logical idea was my own mother, right? I would trust my own mother with my child. And so here we have a grandmother in the woods, in isolation. This is starting to sound like another fairy tale with the Little Red Riding Hood elements. So it really is a Little Red Riding Hood story, but all of the backstory and plot is really Sleeping Beauty. So that was kind of how it got meshed together. And I had a lot of fun. You probably noticed playing with the imagery of dragons and wolves in the story. So obviously in Sleeping Beauty, there's this big dragon, right? Maleficent turns herself into this dragon. And so we had, kind of the father and his uncle were kind of the wolf and the dragon. Hey, wagon, that's a new thing. So the wolf, instead of being a big bad wolf, was more of a loyal, steadfast, true companion, which, since we had an actual wolf in the story, was kind of epitomized there. And then the dragon was the greedy, ambitious, all out for himself villain. And so we kind of had fun playing off of the 2, I guess, villains of those classic fairy tales, but kind of giving the wolf a little more of a reformed story. Yes. And we loved the way, I loved that scene where they had to pretend to be married and the wolf was like the barrier between them. But then I loved how when he got up and he just kind of walked all over Philip to just kind of put him in his place, I guess. It was cute. Do you guys have questions on the others?
You put us on the spot.
It's okay. We can cut all this out.
Okay. Like on the original with Cloaked in Beauty, you had a different title for that, right?
I did. I'm trying to remember what it was now. It was Riding with Miss Hood was what it was originally, because it's all a travel story. So, the whole basically the whole plot is them on this journey together. And so at Little Red Riding Hood, I thought riding with Miss Hood was kind of a fun play off of that. But when my Bethany House team thought it didn't have enough to do with Sleeping Beauty, which was such a big part of the story as well. So that's why they tried to do a hodgepodge of the title too, with Beauty and the cloak and putting those together. And I was happy with that. I thought that was a good title.
Yeah. So that's actually book 3 in your series, right? You kick off this series with a Snow White rendition, right? The Fairest
Correct.
of
Yeah. Fairest of Heart.
Fairest of Heart, that's right. I loved it. How did you come up with the names for they're drovers instead of dwarfs, but I felt like you did a really good job of making them connect to like who their original might be. So how did you come up with that?
That was so much fun. That's probably my favorite part of the brainstorming of that story was coming up. And I didn't do it all on my own. I had help. So I have a Facebook group called The Posse. I kind of opened it up to them. I was like, okay, I know I'm going to have a doc because he's kind of like the head of the group. And so I already knew he was actually going to be a doctor, a retired doctor. And he kind of opens up this home for retired cowboys that have no place to go. So that's kind of how the Diamond D Ranch got started. And I wanted to play off of the Disney names because those were the characters that I grew up with and knew so well. So, you have your dopey and your grumpy and your happy and, all those. And so I wanted to be able to match as many as I could to kind of just give a nod to that. Not all of them have names that really match all that well. Some of them were just good cowboy names that I gave them the personality of that dwarf, but some of them I had a lot of fun with. So and my team in the Posse helped me come up with some of these. One that I really liked was was Bashful's character, and coy is kind of a synonym for bashful, and so that one was kind of fun. And then another one that I really liked was Dusty. So he was sneezy, and he was always had hay fever and had a handkerchief and all that kind of stuff. So there were a few like that had some really close ties, and then a lot of the others were just fun cowboy names. So Jeb was my grumpy character. I think Ike was my happy character, and always trying to make the peace with everybody. Rowdy was my dopey character, but he wasn't really dopey. He had brain trauma, from falling off a horse and getting kicked in the head and all of that. And so he was just a little off, but everybody, was very supportive of him and let him do his own thing. And he ended up even having, some hero moments in the story as well. So I had a lot of fun paying homage to those Disney characters, but still, making them cowboy strong.
Yeah. No, we enjoyed that. We played a little game of when we talked about it about can you match the drover to the dwarf that they represent. Thankfully, Jamie here took notes because sometimes you forget, after you've read the whole series and you're going back to book 1 and go, okay, now which one matched with that one? But we love that. We also loved the way you wrote our villain in that series as well, and that yes, she was still vain and wanted to be the most beautiful woman on stage, but she had this other thing going on. So how did you come up with that?
Well, again, it's how to, make this so that it's relatable to my time period. So 1800s Texas, and so I try to put myself in the position of, okay, if I was an actress who knew that her time on the stage was limited, right? Because once you were no longer beautiful and you didn't, bring in all the crowd, you're not going to get the high paying jobs anymore. And so being she's a manipulative person, but she had a plan. She knew that she had to have some kind of retirement plan. And so she was planning to reinvent herself by she found ways to bring in extra money through thievery and not very good ways. Anyway, she found a way to try to, bring in some extra jewelry and extra, things that she could find. And then so she was stealing these things in order to set her up so that she could move across the pond and go to where, all the royals are and reinvent herself and hopefully find a wealthy husband who would take care of her, and hopefully an older one who would die so that she could just be the wealthy widow. So like I said, she was a really not the nicest person, but that's why she's the villain.
Who was your favorite dwarf? Or I guess drover?
Oh, well, I think Grumpy. I think Jeb was my favorite just because underneath all that gruffness, he was a softie. And just I liked being able to play off of his grumpiness with the other characters. And just those were some of my favorite scenes to write, having all the banter between the drovers going back and forth. And so I think the fact that he had this heart of gold underneath all that grumpy exterior made him one of my favorites.
Yeah, especially the scene with, we talked about the scene with the knife, and he definitely, Jeb won my heart at that moment. It was so funny, and just, yeah, the grumpy guy turned protector in a way. It was fantastic.
Giving her pointers on how to hold that knife
Yeah.
to come after them. So yeah, that was great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit then about If the Boot Fits. So this is your fairy tale that's based off the Cinderella fairy tale.
Right.
Which some of us, a couple of us here, that's our favorite fairy tale of them all. So just kind of give us a little bit about how you came up with that storyline and the characters, because you did a little flipping. It is the woman that actually comes from the money this time.
Right. Yeah. So we did kind of a gender swap. So it's more of a Cinderfella, kind of story.
No,
It's a down on his luck cowboy who has stepbrothers and a stepmom, but I wanted to redeem the stepmother because in all the fairy tales, the stepmother is always evil, right? And there are some wonderful, loving stepmothers in this world that need to be honored for that. And so she really became more of, she's not, well, maybe she and the heroine's aunt, or maybe kind of combined like the fairy godmothers of the story, kind of the mentors, the ones that help her as she's going through all the things that she goes through during the story. But so I wanted to have a redeemed stepmother character. So she really is a very lovely woman, very big heart. She loves her stepson just as much as she loves her natural children, and he loves her. And so he does everything he can, working his way up from the grunt stage of cowboyism in order to support her after his father dies. And so he's sending money home and he's doing everything he can. And he finds out that she was evicted from her home. And he is just so upset by that. And comes home to try to help her find a place and to get settled and all that. And of course, he thinks that the owner of the property is just evil incarnate, that he would kick this widow out of her home. And of course, that's the father of the heroine. And so they have some time where they have to try to get to understand each other and know each other. And even the father, Asher, so Cinder, Asher, so we kind of have a play on the name there, Asher Ellis instead of Cinderella. He has to kind of come to peace with the father as well, because eventually that's going to be his father-in-law. So you really want to be able to get along. So I did have to come up with a new villain though, because of that. And so that was kind of fun, trying to see if I could surprise readers with who the actual villain of the story was.
Were you surprised, ladies? I would agree. And you couldn't figure it out till you got close to the end, I think. So you did an excellent job with that. I do have to ask, because we talked about this quite a bit when we talked about this story, is are you a fan of snakes or no?
I actually grew up kind of out in the country, and I had a younger brother who thought catching snakes was the best thing ever. And so where we were, there weren't too many rattlesnakes. I mean, there were still some, but we had a lot of gopher snakes, and those are pretty harmless. And so I carried snakes around, and I was not that afraid of them. Now, rattlesnakes, I am very afraid of. And so when I added the snake, we had to up the danger with the rattlesnake, because I mean, that's could kill you.
Yeah. So Tip and I are not fans of snakes, like whatsoever, right? I have a real fear. Like the last time I saw a snake out in the yard, I like literally froze. The fear consumed me. I couldn't even move until I finally was like, run, and ran away. So my sister here, Jessica, knows that I hate snakes. So she had read the book ahead of me, and she said, hey, you're going to get to this scene. You might want to skip a few pages. So I was just curious what your thoughts are on snakes. So I'm glad you're not afraid. I don't want anyone to be afraid like I am, but I've tried to like face that fear at the zoo, and I'm like, I can't take it. So anyways, did you have a favorite fairy tale that you enjoyed writing, like out of all?
So, and I don't know if we're talking about this next one, but To Love a Beast is my most recent one, and it's actually not part of the Texas Ever After that was published with Bethany House. It's an independent book that's starting a new fairy tale series, Once Upon a Time in Texas. And Beauty and the Beast was always my favorite, Disney story, fairy tale, whatever. There's a bookish heroine, there's a giant library, there's a wounded hero who is transformed by true love. I mean, it's just the best ever. And so I knew I needed to write that story. And so that was when that series, Texas Ever After, was done with Bethany House, I knew I wanted to keep writing fairy tales. And so the first one I did, of course, was Beauty and the Beast, To Love a Beast. I have a copy. There you go. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with that one. It's more recent in my head too. I'm also working right now. I'm working on a Little Mermaid story that's going to be set in Galveston, Texas, which is a very special one to me because my husband courted me with Little Mermaid. It came out when we first met and were dating, and when we had summers apart during college, he wrote a letter to me and this is back in the old days where you didn't just search the web and find out what the lyrics to a song were. He had an old cassette and was listening to Kiss the Girl over, rewind, go, until he got all the lyrics written out, and he sent that to me, a letter. And so that one has a special place in my heart.
That is so sweet. I did read your To Love a Beast, and I have to say, as much of a Cinderella fan as I am, I think that's my favorite. I loved it.
Oh, yay!
Beauty and the Beast is my favorite Disney movie. Number one, I work in a library and I love books. And she has a yellow dress, and yellow is my favorite color. So this is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can see her shirt, it says bookmarks are for quitters.
I appreciate that.
Yes, and I love how she does bookbinding and she creates these beautiful book covers. I absolutely love that. So I am curious, did you do some research on that as you wrote that character?
I did. When I was first brainstorming the idea for this story, I wanted to give my heroine a little bit more I wanted books to be more important to her, not just as a reader. I mean, we all are readers. We love that. But I wanted to make it a little bit more important. So I made it part of her livelihood. So instead of just, an inventor for her father, he owns a bookbinding business. And I did do a lot of research. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I watched, I found I'm trying to remember the name of it. It wasn't society, but it was kind of like a society of female bookbinders. And this was actually existed back around the turn of the century. So really close to the time period of when my story was taking place. And female bookbinders were really starting to come into their own. So a lot of them, worked for males, but there were some that started to be able to take credit for their own work. And it was really interesting just as a female to learn about that side of things too, because you would think that, a female might have that extra artistic eye. And so anyway, I really enjoyed learning about it. Trying to figure out how she could move all of the equipment that she would need was really tricky too. And so I tried to give her the smallest equipment possible, but it still would have been super heavy. So I had a lot of fun with the weight of the trunks and, all that kind of stuff too, as she was trying to move this stuff from her home base to the manor house where she was going to be working.
I absolutely love the entire series. I will say I think it's a gentleman maybe in Britain on YouTube that does a bookbinding and does special covers that my husband watches. So when I was reading that, I'm like, I wonder if Karen's done any research on any of that. So it's an interesting, I don't know if you want to call it a hobby or a job or both. I guess it depends, but absolutely loved it. So you said you have Little Mermaid coming next. Do you have any after that?
I'm trying to figure out a way to do Tangled. And that was my son and his wife had kind of a Tangled themed wedding, and that's their favorite. She's a huge Disney person, and that's their favorite fairy tale. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to move that to Texas, and we're not going to have the climbing up the hair. I'm not sure that's very realistic. So I need to try to figure out how to make that work. But if I can figure that out, that's probably going to be the next one.
Awesome. And do you think you'll just do 3 in that series as well?
Well, I had an idea for a 4th of It's not quite as fairy tale-ish as the others, but I kind of have an idea for a Goldilocks and the Three Bears with the three brothers kind of scenario. So I might end up doing that one, but I haven't thought of anything else past that. So I'll probably stop there.
Love that. Well, we certainly enjoyed all of your fairy tale stories. Did you ladies have any other questions for her?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. But for our listeners, what's the best way to connect with you?
Probably through my website, KarenWitemeyer.com. You can contact me, send me a direct message there. You can also find where I'm available online. I mentioned the Posse earlier through Facebook. There's a link for that. You can sign up for my newsletter, and everybody who's on my newsletter list is entered into my monthly contest that I do. I give away 2 books a month. Not usually my books, they're usually other books, but similar in genre and style to mine. That's available also. But I really love getting to talk to readers. The Posse is probably where I'm the most active online. So that's the best place to go for just daily interaction with me. But I love any way a reader wants to contact me is welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Karen, for joining us again on the podcast. We always enjoy talking to you, and I can't wait to read the rest of your fairy tale book.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please consider signing up for our free newsletter. Each week, you'll receive news about our events for both readers and authors, plus updates on my books. You can sign up at LiteraryScape.com/newsletter. Until next time, happy and blessed reading and writing.